In this video, I want to explore a mechanism of energy flow and a paradigm for understanding trauma, life energy. Could be synonymous with chi, but there is a vast energy field that surrounds all things. We reach it when certain near-death experiences, when certain dissociative traumas have us release the endogenous DMT in the body, and we have this tunnel of white light back into bliss, moving through the tunnel and back into the larger energy field. And one way to look at that energy field is the circle around the incarnation. And that this energy field is funneled into the shape of the third energy created by two people in the form of a child. And that this doorway where the energy, the masculine and the feminine, the positive and the negative polarity come together to form a third energy, is one where the moment of birth, the energy starts to come in a little bit like the rings of a tree, and it's the core. But if we look at this rings of a tree like a tunnel spiral, getting larger and larger as it encompasses more and more time, more and more ages, we can look at the fact that, within the slice of the pine tree, the first year's growth is contained in the second, and the second in the third. And so we have this lineal progression. And this energy that surrounds the individual, the incarnation, that comes in the innocence of infancy, starts to mature. And it has a natural flow. However, in a culture such as our own that is trauma illiterate, that is organized more around the flow of technology industry and that evolution of culture than around the natural cycles in the body and the natural relational flows with the larger body, with our planet. What happens is the organic flow of the emerging child is interrupted as it runs into conflict with the culture around it. At a scale relationship that is impossible to overcome for a single 6-month, 1 year, 2 year, 5-year-old child. That when you run into the institutionalized wall of the cult nature of culture, there is going to be an arrest, because Maslow's hierarchy of needs intersects with the culture. So we have energy flowing through this process in a healthy, natural way, and it hits a wall. And the wall is this, that the three base levels of human need, survival, security, love, and belonging, within a culture are bought with conformity with the culture. Now, when the culture is perpendicular to the organic and natural flow of energy, the self must split to acknowledge and honor the split that is in the culture. When the culture diverges with its own ecological relationship to its host body, to the larger planet, to the emergent cycle of consciousness and emotion. When a plant's root is growing and growing, and then it hits the edge of the pot, and then has to decide whether to slowly die to fit within the box, whether to circle round and round, eventually strangling itself, or is there some mechanism for breaking free of the pot to continue the natural and healthy flow of life? When this process hits a wall, for a little boy growing up in the United States who does not naturally shame or dishonor his own emotion, but runs into a culture that says little boys don't cry, little boys don't feel the feelings around which tears are relevant. And even if they do, they hide them. You have a natural flow, and it runs into a wall of the cult. Now, the difference between a healthy culture, an environment in which a certain type of growth occurs, and a cult, is its level of rational reference to the experience of well-being that transcends the cult. So a healthy culture of growth is a culture that organically transforms to facilitate the multiple dimensions of well-being within the people in that culture. Cult is what happens when that organic flow of an individual is stopped for a self-referential dogma that is not rational, that has no function other than to perpetuate a status quo that does not serve the growth and development of its people. A status quo, in this case, that says little boys don't cry. Why? Because you will be teased. Why? Well, you'll be teased because little boys aren't supposed to cry. And if you do, there must be something wrong with you because they're not supposed to. Why? Well, didn't I explain it? Because little boys don't cry. It's a self-referential loop that makes no sense, that leads to sociopathic men, that leads to the very bullies that attack little boys who cry. Well, that gets thrown in there. Little boys don't cry. You shouldn't cry because then you'll be bullied. Why? Well, you'll be bullied because little boys don't cry. Why? It makes no sense. It's a cult. It's a fabrication of a status quo that serves no one, that demands conformity or trauma because 3 bullies, older age, attacking someone in their most vulnerable state who is abandoned systematically and sociopathically to maintain a cult status quo cannot survive. This induces a regression into the reptilian brain. Now, the reptilian brain has a magnificent function. It keeps crocodiles alive in a reptilian age. 200 million years ago, there were no empathic feelings in the lives of the dinosaurs and crocodiles and reptiles of that period. You stayed alive using programs, clumsy programs, unhuman programs, sociopathic programs of fight. If that didn't work, flight. If you're caught, freeze. Pretend to be dead. And the reptilian brain is bred and held in the body for a sociopathic age in which grief and pain and pathos is not responded to at an effective enough level to assure the human mind, the human heart, that it will survive. A relic from an age 200 million years ago lies waiting to take over if the human beings in our age fail to live up to their responsibility, to their potential, to their stated values, to intelligence, to kindness. That makes the reptilian brain unnecessary. And this is how it works, basically. The reptilian brain says, as long as you are surrounded by at least a few individuals who care enough about humanity, about the human age of evolution, contrasted with the reptilian age of sociopathic behavior, that will affirm that you do not need me, the reptilian brain, by protecting my dignity emotionally, by protecting the feminine in me. What is sensitive, what is beautiful, what is human, what is emotional, as long as I have a circle that will protect this part of the brain, the reptilian brain will not emerge. But the moment you enter a circle and an environment that is predatory, that is sociopathic, that is dissociative, that is numb and unfeeling and opportunistic, and at the soonest moment that you're weak, you will be attacked and exploited for sex, for my ego, for money, for power, for dominance. The moment you are in a sociopathic environment, the reptilian brain will bring forth a program that keeps the reptilian body, the dissociated body, alive until such time as human beings arrive on the scene. Beings that are behaving empathically rather than from fear. Because the beings that are operating primarily from fear are operating primarily from the fight, flight, freeze program. Once a human being arrives and is protected, once the chemicals flooding the body produced by reptilian programs have been released, the human being re-enters the body as the human brain comes back online as the dominant deciding factor. The dominant deciding factor that says, no, that's not very kind to do that, so I'm not going to do that. You matter as much as I do, so I'm not going to do that. We care about your feelings, so you do not have to be violent to make us afraid of your behavior in order for us to demonstrate that caring by doing what's right for you. We include you in the circle, and so you will be as safe as any of us. You do not need to fight with the reptilian brain. But of course, the 2-year-old who has not been able to bond to either parent emotionally, who has been around explosive and unregulated discharges of emotion in one or both parents, who has watched the sadistic and sociopathic weavings of older siblings, poking and hating and resenting the child because their own needs are not being met. This child does not feel safe. In a completely helpless state, this child is wondering when it's going to die. And so the traumatic mechanism comes in. There are also large portions of the psyche that do not fit into the narrow bandwidths of the cult. And not fitting, these are penalized. These are disowned, unseen. And they experience the trauma of the reptilian threat. It would be as if you have 800 cars. 100 red cars, 100 blue cars, 100 yellow cars, etc. And you find yourself in a cult that does not acknowledge the color red. So when you drive out in your 100 red cars, they are systematically and sociopathically ignored, discarded, violated, banged into, as if they did not exist in a cult in which red doesn't exist. Now, when you have a stereotype of what a hip feminist woman or a new age boy or a cool this is, and that contains 10, 12% of the psyche of that individual, when the entirety of that individual is systematically sliced up, diced with the message, don't bring this part of you into the room, and don't bring that part of you, and I hope you don't have any of this in you. And one is coerced in the trauma of control, the trauma that says, I cannot survive, I cannot be secure in my survival, and I cannot receive love and belonging in this culture, in this cult, if I show up in my red car. That's not welcome here. And we will not apologize for the shame, for the confusion, for the pain of not welcoming this part of you. We do not even acknowledge that this part of you exists. And if it does, it is automatically viewed through a pathological paradigm. It's like, no, there's nothing wrong with my red cars. There's something wrong with a cult that is dogmatically and self-referentially discarding large portions of itself, large portions of its people, large portions of me, because for whatever reason, red doesn't fit into the narrow little box of self-referential identity. And the more parts are partitioned and exorcised from the cult and from the individual, the more trauma there is, the more dis-ease there is, the less symmetry there is, the less balance. So there's more and more trauma, there's more and more pain and imbalance. and the need for security, survival, love, and belonging persists, becomes that much tighter, so the clinging to the cult becomes stronger, more instinctual, less conscious, and the adoption of cult memes becomes less conscious, more dogmatic, to where we get into this state where we as individuals literally believe the lie that the biggest threat to us is not the cult that is systematically inducing these traumas, but are the minority voices, the divergent personas of symmetry, balance, and healing that offer medicine for the potent pain induced by this level of dissociation, of fragmentation. And this is the place of so many of our youngsters who find themselves painfully, dissociatively, traumatically being pushed this way and this way in a way that makes no sense other than the tradition of self-referencing that is highly irrational and imbalanced on so many levels and can never be questioned. The key tenets of a cult, the value hierarchy, the primary institutions, the core traditions, these can never be questioned. Regardless of the statistical output that says, 1 in 3 of you are in pain, 1 in 7 of you are addicted, 1 in 7 of you are violent, 1 in 2 of you hate yourself. No, it doesn't matter the result. It doesn't matter the statistical probability field. What matters is being normal, is conforming, and the promise of the cult that if you will only conform, you will be loved and belong. You will be secure in your survival, and you will be better than those people who choose a divergent path, who are pulling at the fabric of a narrowly defined and self-referential cult to try and open it up. We don't want this lot around here. We don't want this. We don't want this. Is the voice of a cult. And the key is in the minorities. The key is always in the minorities. The key is always in symmetry and balance. And the minority, by definition, is the medicine of the majority. Which, the fact that it is, it's not about the status quo. It's not about what is the majority. It is that the very fact that a cult produces 80-95% of people that all agree and see this one thing automatically without thinking suggests the level of dis-ease that emerges from that amount of asymmetry compared to a cult or a culture that has a balance of masculine energy and feminine energy, a balance in power between men and women, a balance of honor between the majority and the minority, which is why the dis-ease of a culture can be measured by its relationship with its minority and dissenting voices. And it is why the intelligence of a culture, of an environment, of a system can be measured by the effectiveness and the efficiency with which energy is turned into symmetrical well-being. We're not talking about the phenomena in the West where the professors with the most overdeveloped left lineal rational thought according to the culture in the topics of the culture, the people with the postdoctorate PhDs, are less happy than a typical tribesperson who has not been forced in the conformity promise of a culture so deeply into their left lineal brain at the expense of their right. If you have to choose, the happiest people are slightly more right brain, slightly more imaginative and pictorial than rational. They're happier, which suggests that in the equation of transferring energy into well-being, multidimensional well-being, symmetrical well-being, where the heart, the mind, and the body are treated as equals, particularly the heart in a chauvinistic culture such as our own, where you go to school and you learn about the heart as opposed to how to do mathematics and this and that in a way that will supposedly, not actually, but supposedly allow you to graduate and get your degree, and supposedly, not actually, get a job that doesn't in fact use those skills, and supposedly make you more happy than the person who doesn't, supposedly, not true in so many cases. This is an asymmetrical cult. And one human being after another crashes into the wall of the cult and creates an interruption in the life force flow. An interruption in the life force flow that is artificial. It is a stream flowing through a mountain cavern that has a dam put before it that says, no, you cannot flow here. This is not allowed in this cult. Why? We're not going to go into and all that, but it's not allowed. You are not allowed to speak the truth in this situation. You are not allowed to have this feeling in this situation. You are not allowed to want this in this context. If you do, we will pull the plug on your love, belonging, survival, and security. And we will hate you with the fear that is always reserved for the unknown in a traumatized cult. The unknown is the most terrifying thing out there in a traumatized cult. And in the masculine and feminine polarity, the unknown is feminine. The masculine is the little 1% that we know. Of course, you can be a big fish in a small aquarium just by making your aquarium small enough. You just define knowledge as capitalistic, sociopathic business protocols and get very good at that, and now you know everything because that is the world. That's the world as tiny as you've defined it, and now you know everything. But you start looking out there to the dimensions of consciousness we don't even know we don't know, to the estimated more than 1 billion planets that not only we don't know, there's a large chance we'll never have the measuring devices to connect, particularly with our self-referential obsession. The unknown is so much bigger than the known. And the unknown holds the promise of every possible dream, every possible beauty, until it gets captured in the domain of trauma. And the field of vision in the reptilian body cuts out the imagination and looks at the unknown as the most dangerous thing imaginable. Like, how did Timothy Leary become the most dangerous man in Richard Nixon's world? Of course, he would say the most dangerous man in America, but how did Timothy Leary, some guy laying out in the grass, having experiences, how did he become so threatening to Richard Nixon that of all the people, the Russians, the North Koreans, no, they're not the most dangerous people. This person who's moving awareness outside of the status quo. The status quo where we know how things are done. We bully people. Might is right. We burn women and children in Vietnam because they oppose our dogma. How? This is not rationality. This is trauma. This is a severely traumatized boy who has learned that being out of control is devastating in a cult that will pounce on him in an instant and crush his spirit if he expresses the spontaneity of his grief and feminine trauma. And he knows he's not going to go into that unknown again. So suddenly, the personal unknown of a 5-year-old bullied boy becomes the global unknown with the same reference of absolute terror, which turns us again and again to the devil we know, the cult that keeps us grinding along. Now, these boxes of trauma, these boxes of energy, where the natural flow of life hits the cult, and there's a dissociative moment, and there is a confrontation between a cult that is thousands of years old and has millions of adherents and loyal subjects who will happily, in many cases, die to protect the cult, not the people. A little boy runs into that and learns that the truth cannot be told, that the truth terrifies this adult, this person, that their absolute agony doesn't matter, that what matters is fitting in here and here and here. There is a roiling rupture of the natural life force coming in that is cut off in the trauma, in the violence of the cult, in the hostility that eats innocence, in the rage that destroys presence, in the incredible dominance of scale, where a tiny little one, 5 watts of energy, is pushing this way towards the path of life and needs help to lead their water through the mountain pass, through the little fissure that needs to open, but hits a 20 megaton bomb that says you're going to die if you head down there. Now, I know these moments because when my stream has diverged, it has been the adults all around me in a circle that say, don't go down there. Bad things happen down there. Don't go down there. Whatever you do, don't go down there. And every time I've gone down there, it's like, this is much less dangerous than you lot. It's not true. And nobody's looking. It's enough that it requires a venturing into the unknown. That is enough for a traumatized individual. It is enough for a traumatized culture. It is enough for a traumatized country. You want to know why WikiLeaks and Julian Assange and Edward Snowden have had more United States hostility directed at them than almost any other individual on the planet, except maybe bin Laden? It's because they're not playing by the cult's information rules. They're not keeping the secrets that allow an irrational cult to appear rational. Because when you're attached desperately from a basis of trauma to what is normal and known, however sick, because the unknown is the most terrifying thing there, then when data starts coming in that says, well, this cult is cultish, it's not good for you, it's killing these people here, it's killing those, it's wasting energy here, it's destroying the planet here, this is not good. The information leads to a reflexive defense. Don't you ruin my status quo. You are the enemy. How dare you? It's unpatriotic to tell the truth. As the Titanic slowly begins to sink, it's unpatriotic to acknowledge the obvious. And so they must be shut down so that we can get a few more puffs of the cultural cigar, pretending it's bringing us health. So these traumas are taken seriously, and children are hit. I mean, I remember the level of terror in my parents as I led them towards their emotions. I remember the anxiety evoked in my Waldorf teachers as I would look at clear channels of information or bring questioning along this way. I remember the explosions of surprise rage coming at me and the way that I was feared. And it was too dangerous for a little boy. And that's where some of these things get hit, where these structures get built. Because I learned very quickly that the pattern was that this kind of energy, that this kind of dialogue was pushing the button that would get me traumatized out of my body. It would get me beaten. This kind of conversation here, you just have to ask yourself a question. Do we need more of this kind of conversation? Or do we need more Conan? What do we need to bring health to a culture? Do we need more sarcasm? More chauvinistic wit and put-downs? Or do we need to see? And then the question is, why can you make millions for diverting attention and be so frightened and frightening by speaking these energies? Why? Why are we backwards? If what we need is medicine, why? And I want to go into the design of life energy flowing into the body. This would be a great point for a break, by the way, so let's just acknowledge this point. This is actually a good ending point as we move into this. So new topic. So energy is coming in through the body like this. It gets arrested at these different points at different specific ages where the traumatic mechanism of the reptilian brain comes online to take over, to dissociate the human empathic brain from a level of pain it cannot deal with and survive, and take over in the fight, flight, freeze, and the addictions, both. The avoidance, distraction coping mechanism, and the fight, flight, freeze survival protocols of the reptilian brain, inducing a sociopathic state to protect a body in a sociopathic environment. Now, it's very important to understand that they correlate. If you do not have a sociopathic environment, as far as the lenses of the individual is concerned, the measuring and observing lenses that register what is and isn't safe, if you do not have a sociopathic environment, you do not have the induction into the reptilian brain. You have a human being in a human environment with sadness, with joy, with grief, with pain, with anger that is responded to humanly, compassionately. So you do not have an interruption of the flow. You have the full cycle of life. We are in a dualistic paradigm, and so emotions expand in intensity symmetrically. What this means is the more you feel love, the more you will feel fear of loss. What it means is the more you care and need something desperately, the more you will feel hatred when someone deliberately takes that away from you. What it means is that the more excited and enthusiastic you can be, the more helpless and despairing you can be. Emotions expand in intensity symmetrically. You want to experience love at 200 megajoules, you've now got the capacity to experience terror and loneliness at 200 megajoules. It works both ways. You want to have clear eyes that look off into the future and can see 300 or 400 meters ahead. Amazing, that's often the limit of our eyes. Well, those same eyes can now see 200 or 300 meters behind, because eyes don't get 20/20 looking north and then suddenly reduced to almost nothing looking south. If you don't want to see something in the past, and that something is 10 meters behind you, you can reduce your vision to where you only see 9 meters, but it's 9 meters in all directions. Now you've hidden the object in the past. You didn't want to acknowledge, didn't want to honor, didn't want to own, and didn't want to feel. But how can you see 200 meters into the future and start preparing the table for the guest that's going to arrive in a few days? When energy in this matrix of which we are a part, in which we are in ecological relationship, starts flowing through the spiral of time, each loop being an age, the energy moves through the youngest age into the present. A new relationship starts off feeling innocent, very young, and slowly catches up. The energy moves through every age in order to arrive in the present. Now, what does this mean? It means that if you're 43 years old and back at age 6 you had a dissociative trauma, and you built one of these little boxes over here, and energy is coming in, the breath, the ecology of life is coming in at 43. But something in the environment arrests, activates the trauma. at 5 years old. Now, energy is caught here. It's coming up, bypassing into the trauma. And a lot of these mechanisms are not resolved or integrated as adults. So now it's stuck there because it's not integrated. And now it, with the box and with the 5-year-old emotions, continues up to age 43. And now I'm not a 43-year-old. I'm a 5-year-old terrified of being unloved and abandoned forever and being a bad person. Because that's what was told to that 5-year-old when he threatened the status quo by a truth that wasn't welcome. You see, in the culture, the cult-like power structures are cowards. What can be more cowardly than the United States government bullying? I mean, you should listen to some of the phone calls. Bullying one country after another to make sure that Edward Snowden had nowhere to go except Russia. Don't you dare accept our truth teller. Don't you dare give him political assault. Don't you dare. There will be reprisals. You just wait. It's like, oh gosh. I guess we've got to let these sociopathic assholes murder one of their own citizens. It's like, they're that angry about it, right? And they don't own that they're cowards. They don't say, well, let's see, the United States of America against Edward Snowden, CIA, FBI, nuclear missiles, punishment, taxation, the whole, humiliation. No, we don't. They're cowards because the structure is so fragile, because the cult is only held up by intimidation and domination and trauma. It's got nothing else to stand on. A high school teenager can redesign the cult easily to make 5 times more sense if given the chance. There's just one problem. And here's why everyone's going to gang up on so-and-so. Talk about how unrealistic it is. There's just one problem. People are going to have to face their fear of the feminine, which lies in the unknown, in order to do what a 12-year-old kid could easily explain if anyone was willing to listen. And just like there's this interesting statistic Sir Ken Robinson talks about where 98% of children going into school are highly creative, highly productive, highly enthusiastic, engaged in all kinds of ways, and only 2% come out that way. The 2% that managed in, some bizarre way to hang on despite the pressure. And of course, those people who are brilliant and are highly encouraged to go on to postgraduate to try and get the last little bit of productivity and stuff out so that they think like everyone else. Now, when you have a system that is as corrupt and inefficient and nonsensical as ours, when we have a cult based on so much irrationality, that anyone paying attention could redesign it better. And everyone is committed to avoiding the vulnerability of change in the unknown. How are you going to respond? Hit the kid with everything you've got. Frown, scowl, withdraw driving privileges, complain, say that it's not the way the world works, but isn't it nice, in a patronizing way that lets them know that you think less of them for being intelligent. any number of ways. Deny all support. Look around, be told on all sides. If you can push through all of that and hang on to that until you get legal authority and then do something while everyone's trying to traumatize the hell out of you, then maybe you'll be a serious enemy rather than just someone we patronize. Now, these boxes here, where dissociation happens, where energy gets bottled up, they start out with a very high conductive energy. So we've got very efficient flows of energy happening naturally. And then it's hit a cultural wall. Now, of course, some of the reasons for this, and we have a culture, for example, of chronic fatigue, of depression. One of the interesting treatments for depression is psilocybin. And one of the reasons for that is in the balance cycle of the mind. There are many more Westerners who have too many rules and too many boxes and too many, it's like water. If you've ever done plumbing, the easiest thing is you just pour a bucket of water out, right? 5 gallons, you pour it out, it's dropped in the ground in seconds. No energy, just there. But you can make that drop so inefficient that it barely drips. And you do it like this. You don't just pour it on the ground. That'd be too easy, right? You pour it into a pipe. Then you give it a 90 degree. And you don't just do a 2-foot pipe. You start with maybe a 4-inch. Then you reduce it to a 2-inch. Then you turn 90. Then you go here. Then you go uphill. Why do you do uphill? Well, slow the water down. Go uphill. Then you go like here. Then you go like that. Then you turn around in circles. Then you run it through this weird filter over here. Then you block it so often randomly so that it can't get up momentum. And finally, you've got this tiny little drip out of there. And it's like, there's no water. No. There's tons of water. There's just no intelligent design for transferring that water efficiently to where it's needed. There is an illusion of scarcity that is rampant in the acculturated brain, which has learned through traumatic imposition and bullying how every little energy has to get run every which way before the most basic things can be expressed. Oh, he can't say that. That's not a good enough microphone. He can't say that. You can't make videos with a kitchen sink behind you. Oh, what was he thinking? Oh, and he didn't spend 6 years to get the degree that's... No. We're not going to listen to any of this stuff. No, we're not going to do it. You want to be heard? Okay, we've got a plan for you. Well, first of all, you'll go through 8 years of this. Then you publish papers about meaningless things. Yes, we know they're meaningless, but they have to be published in this paper over here. Then so-and-so, who have published many more papers, say it's a good paper. Then so-and-so else will listen to you. Then you do this. Then you do this. And by the time all that's done, you'll be dead, and we can carry on with the status quo, is kind of what it amounts to. We have these trauma boxes, and they lose enormous amounts of energy. Enormous amounts of energy. Just a little example. I've been losing energy the last 15 years. I've been trying to figure out where it's going. I go to this energy healer, da-da-da-da-da. It's trapped in the lethargy, in the inertia of too many cultural dogmas. And where I find it is in the breaking of rules. Not random rules, absurd rules. The absurd rules that say all kinds of things can't be done that are easy to do, that are intelligent to do, that meet the pattern of rapidly transferring energy into well-being. I'm not supposed to be making this video. but I am. And there's energy coming in. There's energy flowing in because I wasn't supposed to get angry at my brother. I was supposed to stay in my left brain. Well, just before this video, I got furious with the pathological dogma that my brother's been using to keep me out. The expression of that unacceptable emotion in an unacceptable way restores life. There's a little bit more dance. My sweetheart cuddled a little bit more tenderly. When we break laws, and this is what psilocybin does in the studies, is there's a cultured area of the brain that requires and dominates lots of blood. Like all the information goes to this little box in the cult that has all these weird little, no, you don't do that on a Sunday, and you don't do that after 3 p.m. and fuck it, you know. Energy flows again, right? So it just gives us a break for all of 5 or 10 hours from that absurdity of that dogma that is cultured. It is cultish. Now, then it flows, and energy comes back in. Suddenly now we're not losing energy and not being able to get out of bed. There's too much energy. What do you do with it all? It's flowing. It's flowing as the cult dogmas fall away. It's flowing. So these boxes take these highly efficient flows. They give it at least a 50% energy loss. And the authentic persona, it's just the thought, feeling, action, and body sensation of a person in an authentic state. I'm flowing through here. You slap me in the face. I feel scared. I feel startled. And then I'm told I should laugh because I'm on candid camera. And that's supposed to be funny, even though it wasn't very funny to me. So, ha 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 ha, you know, that's, you know, your irritation that everyone wants to watch me being slapped on a TV program should just be moved aside in order to be, you know, politically correct. So we have an adaptive persona, which we learn is accepted. Now, there is no adaptive persona when who we are is seen, understood, honored, respected, loved, and supported in our survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, self-realization, and self-transcendence, Maslow's clearly identified path of human needs. There is no adaptive personality until one of those authentic responses gets hit with, that's not welcome here. Now you've got an adaptive persona. Now the adaptive persona takes the same energy from the brook, runs it through a bunch of weird piping, and sends out less energy than came in, because energy is being spent to protect the consciousness through the mechanism of the adaptive persona. Now the energy flows on a little bit more sluggish to the next time when the authentic energy is attacked, and now a new part of the authentic energy is hit into first bit here, the second bit here, third bit here, third bit here. Then this one happens 10,000 times. Every time you do this, there's startled glances. Oh my gosh, this person doesn't belong here. Oh my gosh, he voted for Bush. Oh, you know. And suddenly, and you have adaptive personas of adaptive personas of adaptive personas. You have clones of clones of clones. You have edited clones. Now, I didn't quite get that laugh right. Now, I know it isn't funny, but when I didn't laugh, I got punished for that, so I've got to laugh. And I didn't quite get the laugh because it sounded a little bit hysterical, which it is that I have to laugh at my boss who I can't stand. It isn't hysterical, but it sounds what it is, so we can't have that. So we've got to twist this, and then it sounds too ironic, so I've got to be this and this and that. And so I've taken an authentic flow that just says, fuck you, I don't want to deal with this. Or, I feel so sad. I can't even talk to you and hold you, and I see your face is in so much pain. Get this fucking cult out of our way. And let's honor the grief on this individual's face. Paper pushing, belayed. Corporate minutia can wait. A human being is standing in the nakedness of grief and needs a circle, needs a doorway, needs a single moment in their life that says, yes, I do see you. I've been lying my entire life and pretending not to acknowledge who you are. I see you, and you are welcome in the state that you're in. You are welcome here. In a sick cult, that will get you fired. In a sick cult, people will too hesitantly be too afraid of losing the belonging in the disease to stand in that moment. In a healthy cult, in a healthy culture, you don't even have to ask. We understand the emotional states. We understand that the feminine matters in men and women as much as anyone else, as anything else. We understand that that's what it's all about. That to have the Ferrari and the perfect bimbo and the this and all this stuff that fits in the little package, including, of course, the dehumanized and disempowered version of femininity that is the only thing acceptable, hence the bimbo. You can't acknowledge that she's more intelligent than you. She knows things that she has. No, that's not acceptable. The adaptive persona is who I am isn't honored. So we have adaptive personas, we have massive energy loss. We have the traumatic message, which is the first beginning of the wall. The traumatic message is you may not survive, you may or certainly will not be secure, and you are unlikely to be loved and belong if you proceed down this path. That's all a single individual needs, arrayed against the millions of minions of a cult, to have enormous pause. It takes great courage to take the next step. And in most cases, there is no one honoring that courage. There's no one acknowledging that this is the bravest thing someone's ever done. Into the unknown, and there is no certainty about it. And in a cult like ours, there's even a good chance that they'll be taken down. Particularly if they buy into the lie that they will be punished and participate in that. You have the trauma message. When the trauma message is loud enough and shocking enough, I remember the moments of rage, explosive rage from my parents when I broke the taboo of bringing them into feelings, particularly feelings of helplessness. The dissociation that comes from the shock and the reptilian brain saying, I'm going to take over here. You are dealing with assholes. You don't have a single intelligent person around you that knows this terrain. I've got you covered. We're going to run. We're going to fight. What are we going to do? I got to keep you alive. Now, there is a trauma load that is pressed at an individual. And this is very important to understand. It's why I'm emphasizing this point of scale. Can this finger win against this hand when they both have equal energy? It's no. This finger will break before the hand ruptures. And it's more so if you do it like this. If you've got the allied forces, if you've got 5 against 1, 6 against 1, 7, 100, 1,000,000, 200 million against 1. The one will shatter, and the reptilian brain will enter the scene to prevent that before the conflict escalates to a point of that shattering, because the reptilian brain is about survival. But the load that is on the individual at the point of dissociation is very important. It's very important to understand. The intensity of emotion, hatred, fear, anger, uncertainty, panic, the emotions of the people around the traumatized individual, as the traumatized individual takes those individuals into terrain in the probability field that terrifies them, that makes them feel helpless, that makes the emotional load, how many people are involved in that load and how much of it is directed at the individual, is a message of the threat that the individual is in. And if you've got mom with 98% hatred and dad with 87% terror and sister in 97% panic and brother at 68% loathing and jealousy, he just wants attention, and there you are getting attention with all this rage again, you've got it, and you've got school teachers and this and that and the other, and they are all aligned in a mass that is 1,000, 10,000% more intense than the little voice inside that says, I think this is the right thing for me. No, it's not there. You have that discharge. Now then, the sociopathic dissociation, the reptilian brain, fight, flight, freeze, what do I have to be? So I turned into a clown. That's just one of the little boxes. And all of the hatred was forgiven, all of the rage, all the terror. Oh, finally, we have a clown. That's not threatening the status quo. And be dumb, be dumb. Don't be an intelligent clown. Be dumb. Isn't he wonderful? His clowning years. And so you have this transition, this protective persona that masks the terror. And it's an adaptation. We will let you live without being hated and shamed and traumatized and da-da-da. And you will entertain us. So you have the trauma load at the point of dissociation, at the point of the reptilian brain, and at the point of the crystallization. Because what happens in that moment is there is a contract. There is a contract. And what's happening is there's a probability field in the individual that's looking for the best path to grow. That's true to itself. That is symmetrical. The psyche is always spherical unless bludgeoned into an oblong and asymmetrical shape that is out of balance and thus creates dis-ease as you attempt to drive this watermelon bicycle luggishly forward. It is more and more unwieldy, and you get kudos. I mean, that's what you get. It's like, hooray, you managed to get up the hill in a watermelon bicycle. Well, I could have done it a lot easier if you'd let me use a round wheel. It's just, you're too dumb to understand that. So I guess, mixed bag, I'm an idiot driving this bicycle, but makes you happy, so it's better than having all this, hatred directed. Now, there's a contract that is a survival contract. It's a contract of trauma, a contract of shame, that basically says, we'll let you live and we'll let you belong if you never talk about this, you don't do this and this and that. And it happens at that moment of trauma where you're literally 1 against 1,000,000. And you can't make it. You know it's true, and you know it's more intelligent, and you know it's real. But it is not acceptable currency within this fucked up cult. So the scan goes on in an instant. It's like, what am I going to have to assume, drop, whatever, that I am going to have enough of this psychic load off of me that I can blossom in some crude adaptation of myself. What's it going to take to do that? This is when the identification occurs in response to the assessment of the adaptive persona that is needed, that fits the definition of the contract, fits into that identification. Now, this is a very important moment to understand. So the figures here, because what we're looking at eventually is how do we repair highly dysfunctional adaptive personalities that have been fucked up by their cult to such a degree that they are actively hurting their own interests and identifying more with the cult that has maimed them than with the self they have betrayed in order to survive in an unhealthy sociopathic environment. How do we get someone back? Now, we have to understand what's waiting for the conscious mind and the conscious self as you escape and swim out of the dungeon of the adaptive persona into the ocean and start to move again. What's waiting and what has to be navigated? Because you need to face the intensity of the load at the age we're dealing with. You see, the 5-year-old that got the message that they were the most hated individual on the planet if they made mom feel the helplessness of her father's rape. Because that's the thing she's more committed to forgetting than she's committed to anything, including the life of her son, including honesty, including integrity, including empathy and caring about someone else's feelings. I am not going to feel that. And that's the bottom line here. You want to be some little cutesy, cuddly, fuzzy delusion? Fine. But you take me down there, and I'm going to kill you before you know what's happened. I'm not going to tell you why. You just get it. Don't go down here. Okay, cute little boy, nice little fantasy world again. These moments where this contract gets written, one of the clauses in every psychic contract of shame is you cannot talk about this ever again. This never happened. Talk to the United States government about bullying Chile or bullying Bolivia, this, oh, no, we have nice, friendly, diplomatic relationship. You talk to the translators, and Fred Burke's associate of mine, acquaintance, has written about this with the U.S. government, in Indonesia, when they had the short-sightedness for a control-freaking power structure to actually have an honest interpreter for several presidents in Indonesia. And then they get back and lie about it, and Fred talks about what he actually translated and what happened. And the response is no apology for the lie. The response is a restrictive contract for all government translators that is now more draconian, so you cannot even tell your own spouse where you are or what you heard without breaking the law. So let's not be honest. Let's just punish you within an inch of your life so that if you don't fit into the power structure, we will make your life a living hell. And of course, Assange living in the embassy without adequate this and that and the other is learning what it's like to tell a bully's truth when the contract is you don't ever say what went on, you don't talk about this, and we're going to develop Mr. Smiley Face to pretend this never happened. No. In fact, we need a whole other character about how wonderful it was and going to Waldorf school and what was the color of your mural in your wall? Oh, it was pink. Isn't it? That corresponds beautifully with the 7th year cycle. Oh, yes, we're very interested in anthroposophy and all this stuff. So you have a whole story built on top of a contract that's built on top of a trauma that is interrupting the natural life flow and curbing vast amounts of energy from that point forward. Because now, you little boy, first of all, you've got to now prepare for the next shock. It's happened enough by 5 years old that you know the next life-threatening shock is at any point. So 20% of energy has to be held in reserve. That can't just be flowing because you're not in a trustworthy environment. Now you've got to spend 40% of your energy maintaining the contract, avoiding looking in these areas, avoiding doing this, that, and the other, because that'll get you killed. Now, you got to spend another 10-20% of your energy pretending that that doesn't bother you because that makes them upset. And then you got to spend another 10% of your energy telling the story that makes mom and dad look good when they're killing you and makes them feel great about themselves when they're shitheads. To ask a 5-year-old kid to carry their sexual traumas that they don't want to deal with in a shithead of a culture that is asking them to deal with it, rather than facing the intergenerational sexual abuse cycle that's been going on for centuries, rather than face the truth that we're not dealing with the protection of children, let's just pretend it didn't happen. Because then, the cult gets to carry on in its path of endless stupidity, sacrificing its citizens, but everyone gets to feel safe that nothing is going to change when change is the most vital thing we need to stay alive. Oh, the good old days, the good old boy, nothing, get him, drop another nuclear bomb on our planet. Exfoliate another country with napalm so that we can die of oxygen poisoning. I mean, how dumb can we get? Oh, very unpatriotic. So we have all kinds of protections that protect the contract for a very particular reason. First of all, we all have contracts of shame, pain, and trauma. Second of all, part of the contract is we forget them. Thirdly, they're painful as all hell to remember. Fourthly, you're not going to get any support in this cult for your pain, just to discourage you from delving in there. And fifthly, if you get so bold as to actually read the contract that you were forced under pain of death to sign, now you remember why you signed it. You feel the laser-like hatred and terror pointing at you and the panic of all the fact that you're going to ruin the whole family's life if you tell the truth about this. And you feel all that. And you get the message, die, 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 whatever it takes. Don't go in here. We don't care about you. We care about this secret. And you feel like dying to please them. And you feel like maybe I should just die. They all want me to. They'd all be so happy if I would just drink myself to death and they could say, oh, I wonder why he had to die. I wonder why. So sad, so young, such a pure heart. Yeah. He died so you could remain cowards and not look at your contracts. Good job. Murdered another one. You have to face that. And you can't do it alone because this is the pivot point. You got to break the contract, which it triggers the sense of near-death experience, which triggers rushing in of all kinds of different adaptive personas and strategies to, no, it's not safe. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And it isn't safe. And then you got everyone's fear and hatred rushing at you, trying to shut you up about the fact that they're trying to shut you up because they don't want to deal with that reality because that's a reality they'd actually have to think about. It's like, wow, we're this hostile towards your truth. We might actually have to take a look at that because we say we're open-minded and we're free-thinking and no one's going to tell us what to do except our survival contracts that we've never broken. We're murdering our daughter to keep our survival contracts. Isn't that someone telling you what to do, what to think? what to feel. This is not real at all. It's a lie. But the other thing, when you've signed these contracts early and formed adaptive personas that were safe because nobody wanted to kill you when you were in them, we confuse who we are with the adaptive personas. I watched this happening with my siblings. I watched the point when they could no longer remember who they were because they'd been drilled into the adaptive persona so deeply and been rewarded so thoroughly and threatened so thoroughly that when they started to come out, they were afraid for their sanity and their lives. And it's hard to be a split personality. And so we invest like, this is me. It used to be just what I had to do to survive. Now it's me and nobody's going to take it away from me because I'm familiar with it. And because the uncertainty of the unknown is so terrifying in a sociopathic culture that just like the fear of the larger unknown, I don't know who I am if I'm not this, and I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. Don't you dare say that I'm different than this. I am being authentic. Da, da, da. So there's the massive defense against the unknown of remembering who we were before we signed the contract. Remembering where was the energy going before it hit that wall, turn or die. Where was it going? And how can I continue now that I don't have sociopath, 30-foot giants, relatively speaking, for a 5-year-old, standing over me and threatening that I could actually live my own life. I haven't gotten the message that I'm now somewhat free in a world where part of the clause in the contract was you never signed this. So I don't know I don't know the rules I'm living by, because I had to forget that I agreed to these rules to protect you so that you would say you loved me and would do this and would appear this way and not shame me and not punish me and this and that and the other. Now, this is very important to understand because the child needs the help of an energy field that is bigger than all the hate and hostility directed at it to lift it off before it can move freely again. One. The adult and the child need to know that it is safer to break the adaptive mold. The adult has to break the contract and understand why it was signed and understand and explain to the child that the fact that everyone hated him, the fact that everyone loathed her, the fact that everyone was enraged at her at this area had nothing to do with anything wrong with her and everything to do with a traumatized culture afraid of the unknown and unable to get the support to break their own contracts. And here's this child threatening to throw light on things that are best kept hidden. The child needs to know that it wasn't her fault, that they did nothing wrong, that all of the shame is in the cult and in the adults that are the guardians that are sacrificing their child to the dragon. Those stories where a virgin is sacrificed to the dragon to protect against the wrath of the reptilian trauma, the reptile. We're dealing with domains with trauma, Medusa, dragons, snakes. We're dealing with trauma here. And when the innocent one is sacrificed to the trauma to appease the dragon, the culture dies. When the dragon is confronted to protect the innocent, the culture lives. In the Christian mythology, that's St. George, the one who slew the dragon to protect the innocent one. This is always the metaphor, is the adult continuously sacrificing and deserting their own inner child to protect the cult and killing themselves and the cult with it? Or is the adult fighting the cult to say, no, this is not what's going to go down for my child. I know it went down for me because there was no one fighting on my behalf. A bunch of fucking cowards. And you're too hypocritical to admit it. You're too cowardly to admit your own cowardice. It's disgusting. Get the fuck out of here. You're not doing this to my child. You see? This is the voice that challenges a terrified cult. It can collapse so easily. This is why, Richard Nixon genuinely feels. One guy, Timothy Leary, dropping acid out in the grass could threaten the whole thing. You see? It just might fall apart. It's that fragile. Gosh, we couldn't, everyone would see how stupid we were. We can't have this. Lock him up, shoot him, send him off, Schedule 1, no medicinal value, throw him in jail, let's build a police state. Anything to keep this truth hidden. We have to understand this is our mythology. This doesn't just populate out of nowhere. This is what happens inside of us. As some innocent voice starts speaking, and the cynic and this and that says, no, we got to shut that one up right away. This is social suicide. We can't do this. Get them down there. Put on a phony face. Pretend they're not there. Paranoia. The truth might come out that I'm a real human being and can see through the lies of this fucked up cult. So we have identification and the trauma of liquidity. Liquidity is always the feminine. When you uncrystallize a fragment of frozen identity that is a defense mechanism, you move in the domains of her waters. And she will take you in places you don't know. Because we're dealing with the feminine. It's not the domain of your control. It is the domain of healing and balance. The whole point is to see where she takes you. But when the feminine in a chauvinistic culture has been brutalized, humiliated, shamed, denigrated, diseased, violated, hated, it's very, very vulnerable when we've participated in this abuse towards our own feminine self as men, as women, to buy entrance to the cult, to buy entrance to the cult and the chauvinistic women who will not sleep, who will not fuck the man who truly honors his own sensitivity and hers, because she wants nothing to do with that feminine terrain that has gotten her humiliated and devalued. She hates the feminine rather than hating the cult that dishonored the feminine in her. It's perpetuated. When you go into that liquidity, it is vulnerable. When the last time you were vulnerable, you were shocked and traumatized into PTSD, your body is going to tense up waiting to die. She will not kill you, but this culture may. She will not kill you, but your contract, the one that says I'd rather die than feel this feeling, sign here. Now I'm feeling it. Let me just go kill myself right now. I don't want any of this uncertainty. I'd rather die. You may kill. The cult may kill. She will not kill you. She never did. She was never the enemy. There is a vulnerability and a transmutation and a navigation out of the crystallized coping mechanism identity and into the human being, out of the sociopathic state and into the grief and the rage and the sadness of decades of lost truth. Packets of energy ransomed away Don't expose me. Don't take me. I'll give you my soul. Again and again, hour by hour, the grief, the sadness, the unsung laughter, the absurdity of it all, the absurdity of being surrounded by more energy, more love, more possibility than we could possibly know what to do with. And giving it all up for the crumbs fought over by jealous mice in reptilian brains that just have to look up, remember. There's humor and sadness, readjustment, reintegration, because when you feel how much it hurts to stick a knife in her side, you realize, I'm going to go to work tomorrow, and there's going to be 18 people sticking knives in her side. And I haven't learned yet how to defend her and not collapse the illusion called civilized life. I don't know what to do. It's terrifying. People need help in this terrain. And there's so few to help them. But finally, that trauma load needs to be met, and that energy needs to be given back from the most innocent parts of the feminine self. Say, no, I am not your enemy. No, I am not killing you. No, I am not a threat to your well-being. I never have been. Your lies, your coping mechanism, your contracts, your imbalances, your diseases, your shames, and your fears that get you turning in on yourself to protect the status quo, they are your enemy, not me. You're just too afraid to look at it because we're not joining together in community to protect the essence of the feminine, the essence of innocence in ourselves and in each other. We're not doing that. It's terrifying. So once again, we turn inward on ourselves rather than the healthy aggression to shake the cult into a new shape that is more effective and efficient at transferring energy into well-being. We have to understand the amount of load of energy and hostility towards us so that we can amass the same amount of load to push it off that child. It's like a car resting on a 5-year-old boy. That boy cannot grow until 10 or 20 people push that car off. Now the boy can grow again. But you can't have a single person push a car off. You've got to amass enough strength and force and support to meet the velocity and intensity of the hostility of the wound and push it off, which means help. We need help. Now, thank heavens, all of that help does not have to be in the form of human beings. Thank heavens, we are surrounded by luminous beings and energies. That if we have the courage, the sensitivity, the intelligence to recognize, we can ally in this journey of pushing off the wound. Unfortunately, one of the contracts that makes the wound, or contract paragraphs that make the wound so difficult to heal, is you will not refer to non-physical energy, and you will not see this, and you will absolutely not do this, and you will not. You'll forget all that, and you'll buy in to the absurdity of this world, or I'll kill you. Well, it's a pretty clear contract, pretty clear paragraph. Makes it hard then to get the help needed in a cult like ours, where it's very rare and where it's all around, where we can't see it. It makes it very difficult. But that's what an individual is up against. To do that alone in this kind of a cult is a big deal. And it's the first thing where slowly, as each one of these traumatic moments in abuse and shame contracts with each abuse of authority, the government, the parental structure, mom, dad, this school teacher, that school teacher, this older, sugar daddy, whatever. As each person held the strings, survival, security, love and belonging, and traumas are encountered and different weights of energies and different adaptations were made. If we want to reclaim the sacred well of the divine spirit, of the innocence of the spring, as it first meets the air, before it is crystallized into ice and weaponized, that spring, if we are to harness and partner with that energy, we must get out of the boxes that stop it. And $150,000 worth of energy work and therapy, this has never been addressed. Thank heavens I have a little help. Thank heavens my entire right brain wasn't shut down, and dreams and images can come to our aid. If we understand that in a healthy human being without trauma mechanisms induced by a sociopathic environment, the energy sensed in those near-death experience tunnels, that tunnel is the tunnel of age. You're going back 43, 42, 42, and you get to the innocence of the newborn child. And all of the magic of the multidimensional world awaits just past the doorway, out of the prism and the prison. You see, because it's often spoken as if these senses are the way to see reality. When you take the skin of the body off, we see everything. When we put the body on and then poke a couple of little holes, that's all we see. You used to see everything. Now all you can see is what's within the light spectrum of these eyes, when the eyes are open and when they're pointed here. And then you're going to only process 50% of that because the acculturated brain is going to knock it down by 50%. And you're only going to hear within this sound wave. You're not going to understand this language. You're not going to understand that language. You're not going to even look for sounds that mean this because your paradigm of materialism says that these sounds could not possibly mean that. So there's no energy contained in those sounds. So you don't even notice them. And all of that is routed through the ego train station, where inefficient loads of crude energy comes in and is pushed away and discarded and thrown, and waste is created right and left, and only a little bit gets through to the conscious mind. And then you can feel a little bit here and taste a little bit this when you're awake, and this is not a doorway into reality. This is a prism and a prison, in which a very tiny bit of energy in a very small level in sequential time created by the zoom in of that lens that takes a moment to moment thing and now says this is a moment and this is a moment, when without the lens it's all happening at the same time. It's a reduction, and depression is a symptom of this. So if you're depressive, you need to free up the corridor so that energy can flow through without being, it's like the bribery of bureaucracy. A trainload of divinity rushes in with every breath and every morning, and it gets stopped here, and half of the divinity gets bribed off to get through this checkpoint, and then over here, and then the paranoid self that was adapted right here says, I don't like you, you're not safe, and pushes some of it back there, and then the jealous, 8-year-old who never got any of this and says, you're not going on to that 43-year-old. He doesn't pay any attention to me. have a tantrum in there, and then the train moves a few inches along, and the angry, enraged adolescent who's been tired of being lied to and ignored, puts bolts in the way of the track and has to be negotiated with, and it's amazing any of the cargo gets through. This channel needs to be cleared, and it's with alliance and going back to understand that none of these parts deserve to be imprisoned by the lies of this cult for the convenience of cowards. And no one is benefiting from this level of myopia. No one is benefiting by escalating cancer rates, by defoliation, by extreme weather conditions, by trauma and rape and sexual. No one is benefiting from this. These are the byproducts of this level of sociopathic abandonment of the innocence of the child to protect the parent and the parental power structure, and the abandonment of the parent to protect the governmental power structure. Where are the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? That 500,000 angry Iraqis, innocent, with PTSD, died, according to our own estimates, innocents, for us to not find. And what about the American children who have addictive, violent parents giving them PTSD? So that we can maintain the dogma that real men would just get over it, though they never have. That PTSD is biological. It's in the body. It might just require some of these Schedule I illegal drugs to help heal if you do the research that's been blocked in a murderous attempt to suppress information for 40 years. And the passivity of tolerance is barbaric, is stunning. People cowed and sacrificing their true voice to protect a cult that does not have their interests at heart. It never has. It's just maintaining its self-referential status quo to feel safe. Held in the hearts of terrified individuals who were no more helped by the cult than we are. We need to go back to re-clean up this energy. And this is, of course, the doorway of psychedelics. The fact that even though there's been 10, 20, 30, 40 years of brainwash, of trauma-induced, don't look here, don't look here, don't look here, don't think that way, look this way, do this, you are not this, you are this, you are not this, you are this, and we are not this, we are this, all reversed. And an 8-hour opportunity to look through the veil with a few individuals showing the way. With a few individuals showing the way. When you have a cult that is so fragile that 8 hours can undo 40 years of trauma, lies, and brainwashing, that's a pretty fucking fragile cult. And no wonder it's scared. 8 hours can undo 40 years of trauma and rage and bullying by the entire country? I mean, it's amazing. And it speaks to the beauty and the resiliency of who we are as human beings. I also want to say something that I think is very, very important, which is that almost none of us have effective, adequate support to redo the contract, break the adaptive persona, work with the readjustment in a healthy way, confront that level of traumatic support, it's not supported in the cult. It is actively discouraged. Go buy this, now buy that, now do anything but look here. It's actively discouraged, and what that means is that in order to relate to another human being, you've got to understand and navigate around the many adaptive personas, contracts, and boxes, some of which are trying to destroy you because they've got a contract in there. Anyone that gets near this truth has got to be killed. You say you love someone, suddenly you're the number one enemy target, and they've got to get you out of there. And then they've got to deny that that's why they got you out of there, because that's part of the contract as well. It's you know, there's don't you get near me, don't you? Everyone, you know, it's this deep paranoia of the adaptive personality that becomes convinced in this bizarre reversal of alliances that killing itself and killing any person who's real is the only way they're going to survive in a fucked up cult that will kill them unless they don't. So in this paradigm here, it is loving and healing the wounded innocence in ourselves and in our partner, and being willing to stand loyally and fight. Because one of the things that happens in this domain when the healing has not been completed, no fault of the individual, it's the absence of effective protocol, is regression. You know you're in one of these boxes if you feel 4 years old and you can't be an adult and everyone feels... You know you're in one of these boxes when the truth starts to come out and you won't let it. You know you're in one of these boxes when your body starts telling you one thing and your mind says, no, this is just normal behavior and it's giving you a headache. Energy has to be freed to run free again by breaking the contract, reliquefying the frozen identity, understanding who and why it was held in place, understanding why your mother hated you because you were homosexual, not because she cared, who does, but because of what it means in a cult like this, what it means to the family, what it means to not be able to defend that in a sociopathic and chauvinistic cult where the bully gets the cult's support. It's not that she hated you for herself. She hated you because it was easier to hate you than to hate the entire cult dogma that she could not defend herself against. That level of bullying could not defend you against, could not defend your siblings against. And so she turned on you like she turned on herself as the best way to survive in a sociopathic era of ignorance in which people feared change. And the sadness and the grief of having to murder the innocence in one's own children to keep their bodies alive is a sadness and grief that no parent should have to bear, and certainly not bear alone. And certainly not bear alone and tell themselves that it doesn't exist, and find themselves drinking down the bitterness that cannot flow through because it cannot be honored, because it cannot be spoken, because it cannot be seen, because these truths shake the flimsy structures that keep the roof of normalcy over our head and block the stars from our view.